welcome to Flip Video 8.2. We're going to pick up where we left off, where we established some of the basic causes of the French Revolution. And now we're going to really dive into the key events and ultimately the outcomes of the French Revolution. So this one I have a little bit better organized here. We're going to have what you see at the top. That's a great way to, divider to use for your notes. Put what's on the top on the left-hand side, because we're tracing through the many different stages. Now, generally speaking, what I started off talking about were what were considered to be some of the more moderate stages of the French Revolution. And what we're really going to enter is see a more radical phase, more extreme phase of this revolution that had really been inspired by the Enlightenment. But I invite you through this process to start to consider the extent to which the actions of the French Revolution truly reflect the Enlightenment. And that's going to be a confusing conversation because it's going to be consistently changing as the events unfold over time. So by where we left off, the people have stormed the streets. They've taken over the Bastille. We have lots and lots of social unrest. Finally, in 1791, King Louis XVI agrees to a new constitution to reorganize the government. And this new constitution is going to keep the monarchy in place, but it's going to limit the power of the king. For example, it set up what's known as a unicameral legislature. So we have a bicameral legislature. We already learned that, which is when you have two different groups, two different institutions that create laws. We have the House and the Senate. The Constitution of 1791 set up a unicameral legislature, so they had one House assembly. Members are chosen by the voters, so we see people having a greater voice in their government. But this new constitution really led to more unrest. Some people thought it went too far. Some people didn't think it went far enough. So we still see, despite the fact that the king gave in, he acquiesced to some of the demands of the people, it really didn't necessarily get rid of the social unrest and social tension that were very present in France at the time. We see that the monarchy is truly going to start to decline in its power and its influence and ultimately in its people in the coming years here. By 1791, King Louis, and same year this constitution is signed, when the unrest continues, King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette and truly even try to flee. They try to leave the country and go to Austria, and they were fearing simply more violence. They were ultimately arrested and they were forced back to Paris, which is going to be significant because we now have a king who clearly isn't even in touch with the people, doesn't trust the people, and vice versa. Beginning in 1792, seeing all of this unrest, the constitution doesn't work, they don't trust the monarchy, France attempted to create an entirely new society. So we have yet another stage, another change to the government system, known as creating a new entire way to form the government. And they do what's called a republic. A republic is when the people vote for these leaders. And they wrote this group, it's changing forces of who's in charge here. But this time, it's really still the National Assembly who writes a democratic constitution. And what's interesting is they actually passed universal male suffrage here, which is to say that every man can vote. And that is important. Every man, definitely not women, every man could vote. To suffrage is mean the right to vote. So we start to see some realization here, some ideas of the original causes of the revolution coming into play. And a lot of people were quite hopeful this was going to be the change. And then they even changed a calendar to say this is year one in 1792 to mark a brand new start for the Republic of France. And this is going to, this is where we start to see some of the people unifying around some of the ideas. But we ultimately, this Republic is going to be plagued by the same problems and the same unrest. And the radicalization of this entire revolution is coming to a head with this mistrust of the monarchy, this desire for change, this passion is going to all come to head when the new republic comes together to decide the fate of King Louis XVI. He was tried and convicted of treason, of going against of betraying his country, and to conspire against the nation. And his punishment, the king's punishment at the hands of this republic, this new group, was that he was publicly beheaded on what's known as the guillotine, that machine that chops off people's heads, in 1793. And the people celebrated this. People were cheering in the streets at the beheading of their king. So a truly, truly unbelievable radicalization here in this revolution. And not too long thereafter, the queen met the same fate. You can see the guillotine there with the corner blade that is dropped and to behead the monarchs and the rulers. So we are in a full-blown radical phase of this French Revolution, seeking to enact change in the society. What this really marks is the beginning of what's known as the Reign of Terror, which occurred from 1793 to 1794. And this really began, as I just mentioned, after the execution of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. The leader of this was a man named Maximilien Robespierre, and he had an organized group of people that were basically a secret police, or not so secret police, but his own, let's call him a secret police, known as the Committee of Public Safety. And you can imagine what it would feel like to live in a society here where you would now have the king has just been beheaded, there's this attempts for change at republic, and now we have this new man who's coming in with his Committee of Public Safety who is making it his business to ensure that anyone who is deemed to be an enemy of the revolution as a traitor, who would then be publicly executed with this guillotine. So what that even means at this point is a question I'm going to invite you to consider through your research of what does it mean at this stage of the revolution to be an enemy of the revolution? What does the revolution truly even stand for at this point is a question I would like you to consider in your research. Nevertheless, this revolution, this reign of terror, in this time period, an estimated 40,000 people were killed in 1 year with that machine there of the guillotine as enemies of the state and enemies of this revolution. So we see a true radicalization of this. So radical, in fact, that ultimately Robespierre himself was arrested. And he was now accused of leading France into this tyranny and a dictatorship. So suddenly, it's almost as if there's this attempt to realign to realign the revolution with its initial causes and its initial aims. So we can see what a confusing period and unstable and socially chaotic period of French history and of this revolution, where we have the monarch executed, then we have this reign of terror against enemies of the revolution, and then the leader of that stage of the revolution himself is now executed with the very machine that had come to symbolize his leadership of the guillotine. Ultimately, what we see now is, taking a quick international view of this, spread of the revolution was feared by so many European countries, which you can imagine a European monarch in, say, Austria, Prussia, Great Britain, Spain, the Netherlands, these surrounding regions. I mentioned this before to you, but Prussia is the kingdom that will ultimately become what is modern day Germany. But these leaders, these opposite monarchs, are taking a look at what's happening in their neighboring regions, and they are shaking in their boots, because you can imagine that seeing a neighboring king beheaded and cheered by his own people is not going to sit well with these leaders. So these countries are all going to now start uniting against this new French government. So that is going to put pressure on the new Republic government, and then what's going to ultimately emerge here from post-Republic government. You're going to see that there's international pressure, and not international support for this new form of government. And in response, France actually created what's called a conscription order, a draft. So you can see that there's now, again, a militarization of this revolution, both internally, what we saw in the Reign of Terror, and now in an external way to protect France in that way. In this chaotic period, this militarization and remilitarization, France was engaged in many different conflicts, and from those conflicts, we see the emergence of a man named Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was a French military leader. Ultimately, he was quite well liked. He was a very skilled military leader from a very young age. At age 19, he was leading and winning many military battles. And by 1799, he had become promoted and well-known enough and respected enough in many ways that he actually gained a tremendous following of people. And by 1799, he and a group of men led what's called a coup d'etat. Notice how I said that's a French coup is a hit, and d'etat is of the state, so hit of the state, which is, we pronounce it though, coup d'etat, which is a quick seizure of the power of a government. It's an overthrow. A coup d'etat is a quick seizure of power from one group of people over the established leadership. And he has this coup d'etat, and he establishes himself as the new leader of the revolution, the new face of the revolution. Again, this is a question I'm going to immediately pose to you to look into your research. What does what at this point does it mean for Napoleon Bonaparte to be the face of the revolution? And I'm going to invite you to look into what is it that he claimed to stand for when he came to power. He starts, as it says here, he tamed the French Revolution and the growing issues with his radical features. So he comes and he starts to try to realign the revolution with some of the ideas of its initial inception and initial causes. Yet, in 1804, he names himself emperor. In 1804, he names himself as the Emperor of France. Again, a contradiction that I'm going to invite you to investigate further in your research. Here are some of the ways in which Napoleon Bonaparte, his reign and his rule, which is largely considered to be the end of the French Revolution, which I'll get into, I'm going to invite you to really look closely into the outcomes of this and his reign and the extent to which his reign really reflects the revolution that he claimed it to represent. Some of the things he preserved. He came up with the set of laws that are very famously known as the Napoleonic Code. Napoleonic Code was a set of unifying laws. Under these laws, he set up a national school system. He created a unifying bank known as the Bank of France to restabilize some of the economic problems of France. He required that all citizens pay taxes. Note that, and it's significance to the initial causes of the revolution. He maintained civil equality, that all people be equal before the law, no privileges in that sense. He maintained a secular, meaning non-religious law codes. We're seeing the last remnants of the Catholic Church's power being removed. He really promoted religious freedom under the law. Yet, one of the major missing voices here to this discussion is women, because women, and that word is mutilated here in its spelling, women were deprived of their rights. Women were under the Napoleonic Code, women's rights were women's really freedom in so many ways took a step back because women's subservience and obedience to men, is particularly in marriage and in the household, was completely unified into law here. Was set into law here that women would not have access to these same individual rights that are being guaranteed to men under this Napoleonic Code. So yet another important contradiction here that I invite you to further investigate. One of the notable features of Napoleon as a leader is his interest in creating an empire. An empire, of course, meaning when you conquer other territories and bring them into your own rule. He believed that he was establishing these benefits of the French Revolution and felt that the conquest of a true empire is the only way to allow these ideas of the revolution to spread and grow. And at that, he was incredibly successful. And by 1812, Napoleon controlled most of Europe. He had just an unbelievable vast territory that he conquered. You can see he conquered the French estates. He had dependent states in Spain, in the Rhine River Valley, which is now a lot of that in modern day Germany. You can see all down through Italy. You can see over into what it will sort of become modern day Poland, some of that area. You can see that England was at war with Napoleon. So you can see, I mean, the man had an unbelievable military prowess, that he used to conquer many territories. These revolutionary practices that he imposed within his empire, besides just simply following the Napoleonic Code, he ended feudalism. Some feudalism remained in some of these states. And as it says there, the equality of the rights, religious toleration, he had those uniform, meaning same secular law codes, his Napoleonic Code across the board. Obviously, but this all came to a head here. So this is the conquered territories began resenting this French rule, as many conquered people do. And he began revolting. And by 1812, Napoleon had launched a failed invasion of Russia. His troops had marched into Moscow, but were unprepared for the very harsh winter that they encountered there. When they finally withdrew, the Russians attacked, and then 400,000 of the 600,000 French soldiers died. There was the combination of just the battle wounds, then we have the starvation, the ill preparation, the exposure to the cold. So you can see that this is marking the downfall of Napoleon as an empire. Some of the conquered nations successfully won back their freedom, but the final defeat of Napoleon came at what is known as the Battle of Waterloo in June 18th, 1815. And his failure here was really a marked end here. He was exiled to an island in the South Atlantic. He died there several years later. And this end of Napoleon, this really symbolic Battle of the Waterloo. This is truly what's considered to be the end of the French Revolution. So this is hopefully leaving you with some questions. Hopefully leaving you some questions here in this narrative about what were the causes of the French Revolution and to what extent did they reflect the Enlightenment. The events of the revolution itself, where and in what ways do we see the Enlightenment or do we not see the Enlightenment? And here at the end of this revolution, what I invite you to consider is what are the outcomes? Did this revolution accomplish the Enlightenment goals it set out to? In what way, in what form, and who are the missing voices that who didn't see their rights realized? And that marks the end here. Good luck on the papers.